I don't think it can communicate things better, but I think it can communicate in a discrete, in a unique manner. So we can gather quite distinct information from what we can see to what we can hear. The problem is it's a question of intention. Whether a sound is a symbol or it is an arbitrary byproduct of a process. Do you understand? So there's an intention behind a sound or behind an image. Then there's the message to decode, to understand. Maybe there's not necessarily a message to decode. Maybe there is information we can learn purely from listening and from sight. But I guess I often, my work is primarily working in an acousmatic situation, I might be taking sounds from a particular environmental context, but they often find themselves out of that context. And I often find that what happens is that I realise that I have the stories, the experience of the sound from the original context, but they've been ripped out of that context, and then I find that I'm carrying the experience with me, so every time I hear those sounds I can recollect, I can connect those sounds back to that experience, but I find often that sounds can't speak for themselves. We need they need some subtitle, they need some, So, this notion of kind of sounds can't necessarily always speak for themselves. They can be very fluid. They can be, but I think that's also thinking that's also could be an advantage. We don't always have to think that as a disadvantage. That sound can be so ambiguous and can find new contexts and new meanings. Especially for a sound designer, that can be an advantage, certainly. In Dartmoor is an interesting example. I mean, that was more kind of probing at particular kind of knowledge, which is this notion of place, or the notion of home, or belonging. And the kind of responses I was getting to asking questions about what sounds are important, what sounds do you value, to me, especially the reasons why they were nominating those sounds did begin to tell me something about the relationship to sound and location. And something that I extrapolated from the feedback was often something about ownership and control, which is something we don't get in an urban context. When we talk about control or ownership of sound, space is often corporate or private. We have very little control apart from headphones. From my time I spent recently in Hong Kong during the autumn of 2007, everybody wears headphones. Often with one ear in, actually. Often with only one ear in and one ear out. So there's one ear that's listening. Similarly in London, many in the underground, not everybody, but 80% of the people are wearing headphones. So there's a kind of sense of control. So it's that question of kind of knowledge is often, again, it's very kind of it's context specific. And I think it really is culturally specific. I'm trying to think from my own perspective in terms of my own identity and how I use sound and how I may think that sound constructs my sense of identity. I mean, of course, on a very basic level, one's own voice and the way that one controls one's own voice in terms of accent. In the UK, accent relates to region and often also relates to class, what kind of upbringing you've had, etc. Of course, you can fake that and you can lie. I was having a discussion recently with an expert in birds, and we're discussing whether birds can lie in their song. Because often when a bird is singing, it's about, male birds are singing to call for a mate, and they're trying to show off how clever they are, how strong they are. But this expert was telling me that there's a notion of a true song. That birds, at a certain level, birds can't lie because it's to do with energy and the duration that they put, etc., that they put into their song. That is really about, which is about their genes and about how heavy they are and how strong they are and so on. That they can't lie, which I found really interesting because I always got a nice idea about birdsong lying. But we can lie about our identity. I think we spend most of our time taking on, wearing different kind of masks, which you do through sound. I'm a bit worried to talk about identity in such a. I think identity is a very fluid thing, and it's always changing, and it's hard, especially when we're talking about questions of national identity or ethnic identity. These things can be misconstrued, or they can be highly political. I think in the UK context it's quite interesting because. Going back to language again, I was a student in North Wales, where the first language is Welsh speaking, and their language and even the accent you spoke when you spoke English took on a very profound and divisive, there's no divisive sense of identity. So as a Scottish person going to North Wales, there was a sense that immediately a kind of common kind of brotherhood. Oh, you're Scottish, and we come together in the sense that because you're not English, and we've shared a similar common oppression through the English, which is a mythology, really, especially from a Scottish perspective. I think language is quite spoken language. It's quite profound. It does control actually how we hear and how we listen and how we use sound in every day.